You're hearing the news now. This two-state solution nonsense. Again, now that Trump's out of the office of the president, the Palestinians are rearing their ugly head again. By the way, you know what Palestinians, not Palestinians, but the Philistines mean in the Hebrew? Philistines is the area of Gaza and so forth. Immigrants. Immigrants. And that's what they are. Immigrants on God's land. Dedicated for the people that He wanted on there, and they weren't it. In fact, they're just illegal immigrants. Now, I know that's not PC to say in today's world. I was going to say the cancer culture. That's what it really is. The cancel culture will do everything in their power to eliminate that kind of talk. But the Philistines were illegal immigrants on God's land. Period. I don't care if you don't accept that. If you know anything what the Bible has declared, and if you believe the Bible to be true, then you have no option except to accept that. Or live in denial because of some stupid political idea that's been implanted in your brain concerning the Palestinians, as we would call them today. And everybody always wants to blame Israel for the reason why we don't have a two-state solution. We're not going to have a two-state solution. Now, the Biden administration is going to bring that all up again. He wants a two-state solution. Now, Egypt's now saying that they want a two-step solution. They were kept in check when Trump was in office, but now that Trump's out of office, all these nations surrounding Israel are going to bring up this two-state solution once again. And they have no plans of ever in the future for a two-state solution. They don't want a two-state solution. It's a lie. They want a one-state solution controlled by Palestinians. Here's an interesting article. Why isn't there a Palestinian state? And of course, let me just pick up where it starts reading about the Palestinians. If Israel just allowed the Palestinians to have a state of their own, that's what you hear over and over, there would be peace in the Middle East. Let me again say what I said just a couple minutes ago. Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They've proven that over and over again. It's not that Israel hasn't tried. They've tried 5 different times. And I'll read to you the 5 different times briefly. If Israel just allowed the Palestinians to have a state of their own, there would be peace in the Middle East, right? That's what you hear from UN ambassadors, European diplomats, and most college professors. But what if I told you that Israel has already offered the Palestinians of their state of their own? And not just once, but on 5 separate occasions. Look at the record. The first occasion was in 1937. After the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, following World War I, Britain took control of most of the Middle East, including area that constitutes modern Israel. 17 years later, in 1936, the Arabs rebelled against the British and against their Jewish neighbors. The British formed a task force, the Peel Commission, P-E-E-L, if you want to look it up, to study the cause of the rebellion. The commission concluded that the reason for the violence was that two peoples, Jews and Arabs, wanted to govern the same land. The answer, the Peel Commission concluded, would be to create two independent states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. The two-state solution, one for the Jews, one for the Arabs. The suggested split was heavily in favor of the Arabs. And you can see that by just the territorial lines of the different nations around Israel. The Arabs got most of it. The British offered them 80% of the disputed territory. The Jews, the remaining 20%. Yet, despite the tiny size of the proposed state, the Jews voted to accept this offer. It wasn't a fair offer. And if you study the scriptures, what God promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it's much larger than what you see today for the borders of Israel in the Middle East. I believe soon that will be expanded. But it wasn't a fair deal. Not even close. The second rejection, 1947. 10 years later, in 1947, the British asked the United Nations to find a new solution to the continuing tensions. Like the Peel Commission, the UN decided the best way to resolve the conflict was to divide the land. On November 7th, 1947, the UN voted to create two states. Again, the Jews accepted the offer. They accepted the first offer. Now they accepted the second offer. And again, the Arabs rejected it. Only this time, they did so by launching an all-out war. Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria joined the conflict. No, that was not the Psalm 93 war. Not 93, 83, excuse me, war. That's still yet to come. And come, it will be here very soon. I guarantee you, it'll be here very soon when it does come. But those are nations in the Psalm 83 war. That will be represented in that war that's coming. So he launched an all-out war. Israel won that war and got on with the business of building a new nation. Most of the land set aside by the UN for an Arab state, the West Bank and East Jerusalem, became occupied territory. Occupied not by Israel, but by Jordan. Let's move on to the third rejection. And that third rejection came in 1967. So you had 1937 rejection, you had the 1947 rejection, now you have a 1967 rejection. 20 years later, in 1967, the Arabs, led this time by Egypt and joined by Syria and Jordan, once again sought to destroy the Jewish state. Now everybody thinks Egypt's playing nice with Israel. I guarantee you that the time is coming that they will be part of that Psalm 83 war. They're not going to play so nice. There'll be a hostile nation, as these others will be, come against Israel once again. So these nations sought to destroy the Jewish state. In 1967 conflict, known as the Six-Day War, ended in a stunning victory for Israel and the West Bank, as well as the area known as the Gaza Strip, which fell into Israelis' hands. The government split over what to do with this new territory. Half wanted to return the West Bank to Jordan and Gaza to Egypt in exchange for peace. The other half wanted to give it to the region's Arabs, who had begun referring to themselves as the Palestinians, in the hope they would ultimately build their own state there. Neither initiative got very far. A few months later, the Arab League met in Sudan and issued its infamous 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. Those are called the 3 no's. I repeat, and it still exists today, believe me. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with Israel. Again, a 2-state solution was dismissed by the Arabs. Not just 1 rejection, not just 2 rejections, but 3 rejections. Now let's read about the 4th rejection briefly and quickly, which happened in more recent times in the year 2000. Israeli Prime Minister in the year 2000, Barak, met at Camp David with Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat to conclude a new 2-state plan. Barak offered Arafat a Palestinian state in all of Gaza and, listen closely, 94% of the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as its capital. But the Palestinian leader rejected the offer. In other words, of U.S. President Bill Clinton, Arafat was here 14 days and said no to everything. That's Bill Clinton's words. Quote, here 14 days, speaking of Arafat, and said no to everything. Now, instead, the Palestinians launched a bloody wave of suicide bombings that killed over 1,000 Israelis and maimed thousands more on buses and weddings, halls, and pizza parlors. Even closer to our period of time. The 5th rejection, 2008. In 2008, Israel tried yet again. Prime Minister Olmert went even further than Barak had, expanding the peace offer to include additional land to sweeten the deal. Like his predecessor, the new Palestinian leader, Mahmoud Abbas, turned the deal down. In between these 2 Israeli offers, these 2 last Israeli offers, Israel unilaterally left Gaza. Israel left Gaza, giving the Palestinians complete control there. Instead of developing this territory for the good of its citizens, the Palestinians turned Gaza into a terrorist base, from which they have fired thousands of rockets into Israel. Each time Israel has agreed to a Palestinian state, the Palestinians have rejected the offer, often violently. So if you're interested in peace in the Middle East, maybe the answer is not to pressure Israel to make yet another offer of a state to the Palestinians. Maybe the answer is to pressure the Palestinians to finally accept the existence of the Jewish state. Well, that's wishful thinking. And I'm not going to get into how wishful thinkers of the Christian science fiction theory nonsense that I preach against will have you believe that's possible, or that's going to be coming, because Antichrist is going to have some kind of ultimate peace plan. Well, That's not going to happen. And those of you who've listened to the Last Day series or read the Last Day series know all the reasons why, which I can't explain in the few minutes I have left. Go back to those series if you're new and catch up as fast as you can. There's a lot of information to go through that gives you many of those answers. Not just one rejection in 1937, another one in 1947 rejected, 1967 rejected, 2000 rejected, 2008 rejected. Each time Israel surrendered more land, and it still was rejected. All the offers. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution. A solution that is Palestinian-controlled, period. And once they control it, if they could, they will eliminate the Israelis as quickly as they could possibly do it. Because that's the Islamic mandate from the Quran, to eliminate the Jews, or at the very least, the Jews become their servants. Now, when you read the scriptures and you study the scriptures, you understand that God hardens hearts. You think God wants a two-state solution? Even though Israel will bend over backwards to provide one, if it was possible, God is still in control. He'll allow things if it's according to His plan, if it's according to His will. This ain't. So what is God doing? He is hardening the hearts of the Palestinians over and over again. 37, 1947, 1967, 2000, 2008. Who do you think was in control of the history that I briefly read to you? God. So whatever man tries to do down here, whether in Israel or the United States or in Europe, doesn't matter where, if it goes against God's plan, it ain't happening. Period. God allows certain things to happen in His timeline, but His plan is never thwarted. It is always on target, and it knows what it needs to accomplish. We live in a godless society. We live in a more and more atheistic society. Or if they believe in God, it's just in words only. They don't believe God's in control. They believe man is in control. Man controls his destiny. Well, I got news for them. Man doesn't. Man tried to control his destiny in the garden, and look what happened. Man's been living in a fallen state ever since he tried to gain control of what his life would be like, what he wanted to do, and how it would turn out. It didn't work very well with Adam and Eve, and ain't going to work any better now. Can I make it any more simpler than that? I don't think so. Why isn't there a Palestinian state? Because God ain't going to allow a Palestinian state. You could blame, depending what side of the camp you're on, you could blame Israel all you want, or you could blame the Palestinians all you want. I'd rather put my trust in God and His control over the history, over the present, and what's coming in the future. And He gives me an outline in the scriptures what that might look like. And that's why I suggest that you catch up in the Last Day series as quickly as you can. I have a lot of new people now watching. I mean, never in a time of this ministry we've had these many new people in such a short period span. So I encourage you, read it or look at the videos or do both. You'll be amazed of how much information you can find that is totally different than all the Christian science fiction nonsense that's out there. You owe it to yourself to dive in, roll up your sleeves, and get a new perspective. I repeat, why there isn't a Palestinian state? Because God is not going to allow it. And unfortunately, wars are coming. But God's still in control. God's still in control. Now, I want to hear from you. Play a song.